Premo ato ebusia area memo aha amo akwaba edi aba Ctv eso emaso serie ensama esie no wonso utibi eno ntino ko eye Facebook eye my Ctv gh like ya na wahye no obi ensa akebi area ensam no edo so pa nya obetibie ewo mu eni Mampeni akasa afa eye etuadudom ekuo ahodo ehun wakyeremu SSSA de eyade a aman ahodo bi a womo efi Austria ene ne ekeka ho nyina eboa ama yetimi akon etia sa ekuo we.
The effects of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, coupled the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, are having across the world.
Yabatua and Samuno eso na ababeto dwa se Yewa Samuel abu jinapo ya woshe obwade enwuma ene ensase eso wakasa afa eyamampeni nsama okaye edifa Yewa Frimpombo aten ne galamse report ya wode betu dwa no eho
countenance that. President will not countenance any interference. If there's one person who's been committed to this fight against illegal small-scale mining, it is President Lateefa Akuffo. I've worked with him closely, and I mean closely.
Beye na womenyi yesika semya abofo mutimuso sane empenifo betimi asaso amano asobe ejina ne naso braninti wopeni ya woya Director General woda World Trade Organizer ano wode ensem atudwa ede afa womenyi ye economy no.
Everybody, private sector, bilaterals, all the creditors except the international organizations, they provide fresh money. They will not be able to do the debt forgiveness, but they will provide fresh money like the IMF is doing. You get them around the table to agree. That, I think, is what the government is doing.
And some binum eka we humidi at the Lateefa Akuffo mitwamu ho abayeba and some no entry mo medeto also. Afeje brana mefa ensamuno entremo ensomo na eye yemampeni na adudanko Akuffo enwode ensam atudwa na wopa kire enesese no wo hye eye Austria ene aman ahodo na womunina ekabo aboa woman Ghana sede beye na atuatedom kura ya na womo eboabon ho se womo etumi ababebo woman bi efom no ni na womo etumi esi anokwan enuntimampeni ede ensami atudwa ewo eye Jubilee House wachiremu area ye no ena afi no wo se eba no Russia ene Ukraine entokwa no nso a eyade ane okan ye no de dada eno ene woda so a ejina na no no enhyada ensesa bia sasanse sanema na ekoso no emaso se yehwe ema ni tuchakra.
As members of the United Nations Security Council, we share similar aspirations and values, and we've collaborated at the multilateral level, particularly on issues of security within West Africa, as well as on issues of global security. A major outcome of our meeting today is the affirmation of our commitment to collaborate further on tackling emerging security threats within the region, particularly on issues of terrorism, border security, and maritime piracy. We also resolve to work together to promote democracy in the region, and reiterated firmly our mutual stance against unconstitutional changes in government. Our discussions also centered on the effects the Russian invasion of Ukraine, coupled the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, are having across the world. Undeniably, they have put countries, communities, and households across Africa, and indeed across the world, in precarious situations, and are threatening to derail the development progress in African countries in particular. The reason why Ghana led the fight for the liberation of the African continent from colonialism and imperialism and became one of the 5 initiators of the historic non-aligned movement is because of our history, which has always been against great power domination of the affairs of the world. It is this same principle that led us to vote in the United Nations General Assembly in favor of the motion condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it is a position that we will continue to hold. Great powers of whatever ilk, including friendly ones, trampling on small nations is not something we welcome. And within our modest means, we will register our disapproval of
Yantwa and some so na yankoyanim. Yera Samuel Jinapo wano neshe onsase enafin wabwadie enyuma eswo wababa kasa ediafa mampenini nsemi a wakaye edifa eye Professor Frimpong Boateng na galamse report ya wode ebetu dwano ehu enuntuno wachiremu ese eye report no ayade a womu ehu pa afi mampenini nsemi a wakaye ninano emu eye no kretodo enuntuno wachire ni nsem no mo ediachire ensentrofosi.
I want to remain focused. I don't want to be drawn into, if you want, the squabbles of the past and this and that. If there are lessons we have to learn out of that era, we should. And there are, I believe there are lessons that I have taken on board. If there are things that went on which were good, which were positive, which we have to adopt, we should do so. But most importantly, we are dealing with the lives and livelihoods of the Ghanaian people. We are dealing with their environment. We are dealing with their forest cover. We are dealing with their river bodies. We are dealing with their survival. And for me, that is a sacred, noble undertaking that I want to discharge in my modest way with other stakeholders, with my officials at the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, and several other people who are connected to this fight, for us to be able to make progress. The presidency headed by President Akuffo will not countenance that. The president will not countenance any interference. If there's one person who's been committed to this fight against illegal small-scale mining, it is President Nana Akufo-Addo. I've worked with him closely, and I mean closely, and closely. And I do know that his commitment to this fight is totally unflinching, and indeed it will be scandalous, and it will be far-fetched, and it will be impossible for President Akufo-Addo to interfere in the fight against illegal small-scale mining. Indeed, on the contrary, he is the man who is giving me all the courage, who's giving me all the strength, who's giving me all the backing and authority and mandate to go frontal in dealing with this matter. I know the information minister to be a gentleman of honor, and I will never ever in the wildest of my imagination ever come to the suspicion that the information minister will be engaged in an act like that. I'm sure you media people will agree with me, and I think he's a very fine gentleman, decent gentleman, who carries himself very well and does his business with a lot of integrity and candor.
Director General Yawoda Well Trade Ano Dr. Ngozi Okonju na nesema wode atujan weno wasre ebibrema mani na said ya na womo edi sika adwuma no ebeya nka womo enhwe sika sam no na womo enka ne bi womo ye bibia sika no womo nhwe se wobetimi ateso na etimi aso ne womo epe no sanse no woba ebibremu hanum sa man bebre na na abafom ti ne betimi aboa pa ene se eba no sika sem a womo ebehwe ne ye netimi aboa wobia.
Ghana's composition of his debt is also slightly different from the composition of debt we had then. We had debt to the Paris Club, which is to official creditors. Part of Ghana's debt is domestic debt, which I think they've restructured already or are in the process of doing. And then you have external private sector debt, sovereign bonds, which is private sector and requires it requires a lot of work to bring those private sector people to participate in the terms. So I think what they are doing now, one, getting some of the bilateral creditors, not just Paris Club but China, on board in the common framework that has been put together by the G20, bringing them, then asking the private creditors to submit to the same terms. That is what is needed, and it's not easy. It's going to take quite a bit of work, but the hope I have for you from our lesson is that no matter how hard, if you persist, you do the reforms, you show them how it's affecting your fiscal situation, and they see you visibly trying to solve the problem of the macroeconomic management of the economy. And then you insist that everybody, private sector, bilaterals, all the creditors, except the international organizations, they provide fresh money. They will not be able to do the debt forgiveness, but they will provide fresh money like the IMF is doing. You get them around the table to agree. That, I think, is what the government is doing. It took us 2.5 years to get everybody on the same page. The last thing is that you need a country to back you. So out of all your creditors, there has to be one of them who can go around persuading the others. Most of the time, your largest bilateral creditor should take that lead. Because then if they are ready to give certain terms, that means that the others will also be ready. And I think that's one of the challenges Ghana is facing now, trying to get that done. We were able to persuade, the British were our largest creditors at the time. And Gordon Brown was the Chancellor of the Exchequer then. So I was able to persuade him that we're doing all the necessary things. You, Brits, have to be first to take a haircut, to say you're going to forgive this, otherwise the other creditors will not come around. So these are some of the tricks. But let me end by saying that thinking about the future is also important. It's not enough to just get the debt now restructured or forgiven. You have to put in place fiscal rules that prevent that from happening in the future, at least as much as possible. So we did do that in Nigeria. It lasted for some time, but not forever, because the government can also come and Parliament can sweep away those rules when they want. But for a period of time, we had these rules that did not allow us. For example, we said our debt to GDP ratio can never exceed 60%.
Yadaswa ewo Dr. Ngozi Ensemno Emudia na wenu wode ato Ghana ban enimu se wonfa emrebi ema no ebe bata womu enam kwanbone so edi yinam ewo epo ahodo ne so sansa sanema no amani musu pa ekoso na so nina no eyade a ebobo aman bebre na fom tie be ya anka ban no emfa emrebi emata sade no.
At the WTO, many agreements have been stuck for a number of years because it's a consensus organization. Every member must agree on everything before it can be moved forward. Can you imagine how difficult that is? So as a result of that, things have been a bit stuck, but we were able last June to move things so we can conclude some agreements. And one of them was on fisheries. This agreement is to do away with $22 billion in harmful fisheries subsidies that allow countries to fish illegally in the oceans, to overfish the ocean's fish stocks, on which many people depend. 12 million people in Africa depend on fisheries. So this agreement will now make it possible if someone is doing illegal, IUU, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. If they are doing IUU fishing, they can be brought to the WTO and reported for doing that. So this agreement is very important. You have many artisanal fishermen and women in Ghana. Ghana has an important population along its coast that lives on fisheries. But very often there's illegal fishing in your waters. So ratifying this agreement is going to help be able to control that kind of illegal fishing and overexploitation of your waters. One of the things I've come to ask Your Excellency is to please, Ghana should ratify this agreement as quickly as possible. If you ratify it, there's also a fund called the Fisheries Fund. We're raising $20 million and already about 7 has been pledged to help developing countries strengthen their management capacity to manage their fisheries. Many of our countries need strengthening. I'm sure our colleague from fisheries can say something about that. So how do we strengthen the capacity to even know statistically what kind of fisheries we have, to be able to have the appropriate data, to be able to even pursue those who are fishing illegally so we can report them? What are all these mechanisms? This fund will help you strengthen the capacity so you can implement the agreement. So that is one of the agenda that I came here to ask you, Your Excellency and Mr. President, to please help us ratify the agreement.
Yama memo ene empanifo no ma wo mo ene aduane ema yankwada no e wo school sahudo mu meche school feeding caterers no wose wode wakade egu ho adan ya aban de wo mo ka afei eyesika aban chi a ewo akolaba kubia etiso no say sika no esha enu ntie be ya ankaban entumo enfema wo mo eno nam so ema watonsa edi afre ensentrefo aye enhyemu ede wo mo nsem no amane aban sa aban anhwe no wanto sikani mu afen so e ka aban de wo mo no wantia de a wo mo adwuma no wanya enye bi wo de wakade ni na no egu ho.
School feeding caterers are public servants like teachers, police, doctors, nurses and other employees that provide state services to the public but are being discriminated against. Can anyone just sack a teacher, a nurse or a nurse? Can government refuse to pay teachers or nurses even for 1 month? Why are they doing the opposite when it comes to caterers? A contract is a contract, and our human rights must not be abused because we are caterers. Are we not human beings? Are we not citizens of Ghana? Are we not serving the nation? The conditions of services, payment and treatment of caterers by the School Feeding Secretariat, the Ministry of Finance and Government are deplorable. They have worsened our economic, social and health situations. Caterers have become indebted to the traders and farmers we credited items from. The failure of government to pay caterers on time, to increase the price of a hot nutrition meal from 97 pesos to a meaningful amount. The underpayment and various deductions and other items listed in our letter to the President are making caterers a laughing stock, impoverished and very miserable. Caterers have become worse than beggars and we are suffering. We have cried and talked plenty, but our appalling situation remains the same, and that is why we are declaring a nationwide strike until our condition of service, price of a meal, payment issues and treatment are addressed positively as per our 10 points in our letter to the President. So on this note, we are appealing to the government to give us the third term payment, so to give us money to go back to the kitchen. Without that money, we cannot go back to the kitchen because we don't have money. We don't have money. And the increment too. If we don't know how much the government is going to give to us, we cannot go back to the kitchen. We need to know.
97 pesos no womo NGBiomudia na yetwa ensemuno eso. Na Asian African Consortium ya yetwanitia se AAC womo eshe eye Jospon Group of Company asie womo any Council for Scientific and Industrial Research CSIR womo asensan entiasie apamani na ene se wobobo ho adwendwen kwan a wobetimi afaso ede eye de friend se emono aba woman Ghana mu hanum se a ebetimi aboa wo mo pekwanfa wobetimi ede emo anase wobetimi akra mu no ede aba woman Ghana emo eno ntino se dia ensem no ekoye no Ctv Kasiebo yede to also
Well, Abra Chief Executive Officer Edema ASEAN African Consortium, Mrs. Sian Japan, and Central for Ekasa, and Ode Etu Jesse, Ushe Nejumukuna, and when they won't sem and more Edimo Akotine Nanso, or for saying is what in radio to Moses Quambia Sono, said your mind now could draw ya, and so Sasaboni, and you and Sono, Mobeshe, na Edia Tom, said the Beya, Yendriano, Ebetime, Akosuye, Rafe, a Bononso, Akoso, na Endrianenso, Etimi, Ebusu, Ebu or Mino Emo, or the two just ekama yese emu bebre na yakra efiamono ne edebom mine mu enu ntikra na nam so ani ebono kwa ena ekosro ensam sei eni nhyemu sei ena ode etudwa
enu nti ye de sei eni so sei ye be ye rice production but nye no pe ne ye dua maize ne de keka ho nyina se de be ye a enuane ahora ye kraba o memu a enu nti ye sika nyina ye so ade kwa amana no eso beti kakra na enu na ma ya tunsa afrasi anopay and say omo ye nkrofo bi a eba no technology a omo ye ade pa omo akwada mu pa eba no research and development eba no innovations a omo ye ade na che say just pon no enam say yen ta yen ye evidenti ye gray area ma ye na yen pese ye be ye yebeti ewo baabi enti ya partner ye ne nkrofo ahodo eye academic institutions and schools ahoro bebre universities ahoro our research department abom eye adwuma said ye be ya ye be share from end to end of the rice value ni nyina
okasa wiye and Professor Poppy Bonsu ya oye di dash J edema CSIR Ghana ononso auditu just say obodwumeko no abaso yepa se omo ashabo ya etisa
AAC opede wayiri won hwana wodua mu na onye nzama kakra oka ho na za wehuyi de sare ye kuaye kese a intumi ye wabra research nka ho nti wanye CSIR another Council for Scientific and Industrial Research na Ghana ha nyina say ye can research another nhwehwemu a kan de offer no kuaye ho a na ye wo ho nyimzi pa yesua nzama no bebre ye wo yesua duaba dodo a wotum wodua emu na ahuru bebre wo Ghana nti ye ho rebom na ye ho na ye dwuma no nti say duaba de wodio fertilizer that was gu ho insure oide was gu ho ni nyina CSIR yanye AAC Asian African Consortium ofi Jospon
Yantwa and Samono Eso Naweno, a Chief Executive Officer wano and that Jospon Group of Companies ano Ora Joseph Sian Ejapon, Eddie and Sem Ato a Council for Scientific and Industrial Research CSIR for enim and some worker and sen and Sentemiana Ejanino and who quatre panty woman so any wafemudie so will betty me abua womona and yanino and who enquatre sa a woman Ghana emu.
Wade nsami etudwa wobra wonum kohyiaye ewontiase apambiase a wode wonsa ehye nkrata se beye na wonum ebetumi eduamo na wadua no ne dosopom ama obia enye bi ne honum ena Chief Executive Officer Emma Jospon Group of Companies Ora Joseph Sian Japan wade tudwa wo kire se eneyi eduane ho akwatwepa ewo man nimu a yetimi kura ekra ntos jene soya eni enwena hodopi edifri amonone ebo man nimu.
Ghana is in crisis. We are in crisis now that all our financial uses are in crisis.
Inflation is about 59%. One of the driving force is food, which is 57%. And I'm very glad that CSR is one of the biggest, I would say it's not one of the biggest research institution. And our director have just announced 7 of the institutions are into food. So you are the Nehemiah of our time. You are the Joseph of our time. You have to solve this problem. We just want to come into this by our DNA, that when we see crisis, we want to rush and solve it. Not that we are interested about parading ourselves that we can do the right. We've never done it before. But because we are always poised that whenever there is a challenge, we must rise to the call. We, at that time, rose up in COVID and brought it. So I'm praying that CSIR, as we speak today, we are importing tomatoes, we are importing onions, we are importing soya, we are importing maize, we are importing rice. And all this CSIR has their fullest competency of doing it. And that's why we have come to collaborate with you that this crisis, we must deal with it.
Ebra ora sian Japan ede ne kasa ekwewiye ena wodi tudwa wo kire se akade bia ho behia se wonom ede beye emufuo se beye na afifiye na oman Ghana obia enye bie no banwoden se wo bepe ede aboa ne senti wosan ede to stakeholders ahodo anim se womonso emfa wo ho enhyemu bi.
We have the men, we have the professionals, we have everything here. So we have come to support you, we have come to develop you. And that is why we have not sat down alone to think that we can do it. No, we cannot. We are humbly coming to cooperate with the existing structures. When we traveled to Thailand and we did the research, we saw that we are on the right path. Ghanaians are on the right path. Every yield that they have achieved can be achieved here. We even have better soil than them, better climate, rainfall pattern, everything than them. We saw that the difference was just a little. So we have come here to support. And that's why the just philosophy of this rise is cooperating with existing institutions. We signed an MOU with University of Cape Coast to collaborate.
Yanko Enfinfi Mantemu na Enfantimaya wo Upper Denchira East. Mesni no emu and assessor adishia. Ewo honum womo edi wo hao atu wobia enim. Womo actually mu say ansana wombetimi etwa womo asum defense star call ni bieno. Well, I just said one more afo enua ansana network no chese ademu ede ama womo enuntino one more ede atudwa se teacher phone na no ha womo adwen papa emwama adechire ne adesua enkoso ewo mensini honomo afenso adesua so a womo eti honomu ni na no so sasem we ha womo srempanifo womo akebia ewo mu se wonhwe na wonye bibi emfa ho.
Adishia wonom ewo Infantiman a eno no ewo Upper Denchira East mensino emu won finfini mantemu wonom ebre ye pa seba ne se woni obi ebedi nkita ho ewo telephone anase mobile phone ho a eyade se wonom ebre esanse reception anase network eni ho adishia bi eyade se wonom afuru nua hodo ansana wonya network bi esumi ene wonom adofo anase wonom abusua atwehwe enkomo Mary Mensa ekire kwanya wonom efa so afuru dua ede ye calls.
Humana sense design no be a penalty. Give me a sense. I'm not doing it. Oba ya titire, ebi mu titire enketwa nge wunya ne enu ekurata achi de bobo. Ye nya he ntumombo aye ankai a teachers for no mo fro ye ko.
Ya akofo.
No mo fo ye ko.
O fo ye ko.
Etu ba
ko no.
Wabra ye ne majua ene adehye no bi ekasa ye no wode to dwa wo kire se ade se digital transformation agenda no enya ade se aban no ede wonom aka ho a wode ade srede eto aban nanim se enimanimu yi a wonye bibi emfa ho ema wonom
ese network nda ya ble nti asra aban no ye ne aye kwai nye network nso ayenya nso ayenya nti asra no wonye bibi mfa ho ma ye
wakasa wieye ena Richard Kusi a ono no oye okyerɛkyerɛni ewo Mfanteman MA Basic School enso ede nsɛm sei eto yenim
Some very hurting because some of us if you actually na yaba na I say abedwuma de oman ne som de bia aban be frɛ se koye adwuma no so ko na yemu bi kura ba network sem to man timi antena mo sa de ekɔ edu ba bia ebrei bia ji se fo be po ko gyina ba bi sum ne ntontom mansa ne timi po ayɛ ayɛkɔ mpo nsɛm a be kampo ya na edin sɛ nipa na wo frɛ no mpo beti nti ma communication between your family no ehun odin pa
enu achi ena Nana Kofi Otu a oye ohene ema omanfo awonom ewo Mfanteman enso ede to dwa wo kyem se oha wa ne manfo efam no enya de se nani eje ho nsama wono so ede to dwa no ebini
omama ye bibia ankodo osande nne bibia akoye digital network nti se nye bibi afa afi aban nsem kra na se network nye adwuma omama ye bibia la kechi
ni krakra mu no ye ne assemblyman ema adehye a wonom ewo Mfanteman electoral area Ben Yokes enso ekasa ya wono so ne nkyiremu a wode ema yen eni
akwa assembly medi wo dwuma fa ba bibia osese ye fa bia nso hweboada obia nkasa ho enti eba ne sa na meso menenam no amanfo nkyɛn sɛ menya mboa bi a sɛ bia menya obi bi obotum aboam sɛ ode mbɔ company bi ne nkyɛn a na mo
Kasiebo no esi yebre no ayebe ansana no yenda aboafo ase eye Heritage Orthopedic Herbal Clinic wose se eye wenchi enkase no ene hawana se wundompe no ena yade aba ho kra se ye spine problems wose eye wo joint pains ena eha wo kra na fabra wasanso ehwe hypertension prostate diseases nina woye ho adwuma infertility say ye typhoid wo say stroke yade no kra ena wo bia wo de ba womo ewo baabi a wo betimi aboa wo ama sa stroke yade no etumi efi ho no mu akonecha kwan eye East Legon eye Nana Krom Melcom hodum na womo wo Melcom no echipe wasanso ewo Kofodua eye Hackman Junction ye wo Efidiase Kumase womo ewo eye Nongo Pechansa wobetimi afre wo mo ewo 0244 494 100 ana 0244 495 535 midi ede Lateefa Akuffo midi wesi